Hello and welcome back to Manatutor MTG Draft. We're back. We took a little bit of a hiatus.
We're still back.
Yeah, we took a hiatus for Outlaws of Thunder Junction and Modern Horizons 3. It didn't quite work with our schedules. We had some home construction projects going on and other things to do over the spring and early summer. But we are back for Bloomburrow and excited to deep dive into the spoilers that have come out so far for that upcoming set.
Before we dive in, one thing I wanted to mention is that was kind of exciting is that you basically won the equivalent of $100 in an Arena Open recently. Well, maybe not quite so recently, but a little bit ago. But it's pretty exciting nonetheless.
Yeah, so while we weren't necessarily shooting videos, we did do some playing, but I did decide to just go ahead and do an Arena Open. I don't usually do those too often because I got to admit, I'm biased towards draft, and the first day is always sealed, right, which I don't love to get through. If you open a bad set of packs there, you're not looking good. So I don't like that randomness, but I opened up a good set of packs, went undefeated the first day, went to day 2 because of that. And after going undefeated in day 2 draft 1, you end up qualifying over to day 2's draft. And in that, I'm allowed to have 2 losses before I have to lose. And so I won my first game. It only takes 2 game wins in order to win $500. But then I went lose twice in a row. So I didn't actually cash money, but I did get 20,000 gems, which is worth $100. So that was pretty cool to go into that final draft and make some gems out of it.
That's exciting.
But let's get into Bloomburrow because that's the topic here. And let's kind of focus a bit on some of the top-down approach to the set. I think it'll be helpful here to go over the archetypes. You want to introduce us to that?
So for those who may not be aware, this set, unlike a lot of previous sets, each archetype revolves around a specific type of creature. And so we're going to run through them. We'll talk a little bit about the major mechanics of each archetype, and we'll talk about whether it's control or aggro. So first up, we have blue-white, which is birds. So this cares about flyers and non-flyers. It's classified as control because it's probably going to be a little bit slower, and there are a lot of sort of cards where you might be using some bounce or some, giving creatures flying, taking flying away, things like that. So following that up, we have rats, which is the black-blue archetype. So this is threshold control. So it's going to care a lot about whether or not you have achieved threshold, 7 or more cards in graveyard. And it's generally going to be a little bit slower, right, as blue-black tends to be. Next up, we have black-red lizards. So this is our first aggro archetype that we've seen that is in this set that we've covered. It focuses a little bit on opponents losing life. So basically, like if an opponent has lost life this turn, something that you're playing becomes more powerful. And so that's going to obviously lead to aggro because you're going to want your opponent to lose life, so you're going to have to attack into things. We have red-green raccoons. So this is classified as aggro, but this is definitely more a mid-range deck. This is the expend mechanic, which basically requires that you spend 4 or more mana to cast a spell in a turn. So when you hit that expend threshold, so to speak, something will happen. So the card will have a triggered effect, basically, when you spend more than 4 mana. So that's what makes it mid-range, because you're obviously not going to be doing that until turns 5, 6, 7, probably. We have green-white rabbits. So this is a pretty classic white-green tokens archetype, though it also has this offspring mechanic, which I believe a new mechanic in this set. I don't think we've seen it before, but when you cast a creature, it'll have the option to pay an offspring cost, which is essentially a kicker. And when you pay it, you will get to create a copy of the creature that is a 1/1 token. And so basically, this is a go wide, make a lot of tokens. These tokens will also not just be tokens, though. They will generally have activated or triggered abilities as well. And so I'm actually kind of interested to see what this is. This is classified as control, probably, I think, mostly because it's going to be a little slower with the offspring costs, but I could see this playing out a little bit faster depending on the game. Next up, we have white-black. This is bats. So this is a pretty typical archetype I think we see in white-black. It relies on life gain and life loss. It's also classified as control. Fair number of flyers in this archetype as well, along with the birds. Next up, we have blue-red. This is otters. This is a fairly common blue-red archetype as well. It's a spell slinger, spells matter, but also the otters typically have prowess on them. So it's going to be very much a tempo style. This is probably one of the slower of the aggro decks, however. Next up, we have black-green. This is going to be squirrels. So this is going to use the forage mechanic, which basically allows you to either sacrifice a food or remove 3 cards from your graveyard to activate additional abilities when you cast your cards, or as an action on your turn. It is also a control deck, so it's a little slower, as black-green tends to be. Next up, we have red-white mice. This is the Valiant aggro. So Valiant is basically when the creature becomes the target of a spell or ability you control, something will happen. It usually gets more powerful, might get trample, vigilance, something along those lines. And so it is very much focused on casting spells on or using abilities that target your own creatures to buff them in some way, and then using that to, wear down your opponent. And then last but not least, we have green-blue. This is frogs. And this archetype focuses very heavily around enter effects and triggers, with the ability to flicker and bounce creatures to your hand or, exile and return. And so with a lot of ETB effects, this is going to also be sort of a slower deck focused on control into the mid and late game. And so that's the different archetypes. One thing as well about it, there aren't really any 3-color archetypes with this because there's not a ton of fixing, I would say, in the set. So you're probably going to be staying in one of these sort of typal archetypes. One thing that's interesting, and I know we'll be talking a little bit more about it later, is the idea of there are monocolored cards that are kind of hidden multicolored, where you can spend one color or another for their colored mono requirements. And so these cards can go potentially in multiple decks. Again, it's going to come down to paying attention a lot to creature types to see what decks they can play in well. That is going to be kind of a signpost for you, just given the way the different deck combos work off of each other. Overall, though, there's these sort of 10 archetypes as we normally see. And so, Jeremy, do you want to talk about a little bit? I know I kind of went a little bit to the speed by color, but I think you wanted to break it down a little bit more.
Yeah, basically, you'll see a lot of control being called out here by Wizards. So when we actually do like a deck count here, there were only 3 decks that were not specifically called out as control or aggro. And that was Raccoons, which is more mid-range. Yes, it's a mid-range deck, but question is it trying to attack and trample through, or is it trying to slow things down and then overrun with the board? It seems like it's trying to attack and aggro through. So if we had to classify it as aggro versus control, that would probably be more aggro. Then rabbits, token go wide. This is up in the air too, but typically these go wide decks really need to go wide pretty hard and do so pretty slowly. They build up a huge board, then +2/+0 all your creatures or something like that, and then get through and kill your opponent in one swing. So in that aspect, it has to survive the long game and doesn't want to attack. It'd be trading off early, so it's building a wide board, and that takes time to do. So control in that aspect usually. And then the last one being otters. So they're calling it aggro because they're calling it tempo deck, and a tempo deck is eat away at your opponent and then maybe finish them off with some of the spell slinging related stuff that will reach at the end, almost like flying as a finisher, but through direct damage done through incidental means. So even classifying 2 of the 3 questionable decks as aggro, we still get a count of 6 decks being control based and 4 decks being aggro, and where the aggro decks are just the red decks and all of them. So all 4 combinations of red X is labeled as aggro by that. this is kind of giving you a clue that aggro decks do perform fairly well early on in a season as people are figuring out decks because there's less to decipher. So if you want to win early, going into red is not a horrible option. And then you can also be stealing away not only the red cards, but maybe the aggro cards that nobody else is going to want anyway if you're already able to solidify yourself in red. Now, if that lane's not open, definitely cook. Like it's early on, you want to be learning as well. So I'm not saying like go all in on red, but it's just something to keep in mind. Just looking at the archetypes, what they're kind of signaling to us might be good. Yeah. So with that, it might be good to talk about a little bit about what we're excited about in color rankings. Right now, I have green being the best by actual ratings of cards. I think green has been sort of the less loved stepchild of Magic and Limited in a lot of formats. Not so much recently, but I think
right.
that
Yeah, there's been a couple Wilds of Eldraine green was pretty good.
Right, but they designed these sets far in advance. Actually, I heard this one was first theorized 4 years ago. Not that they really started designing at that point, but they've, I think, have a year or so ago been designing sets, maybe 2 years ago, like saying we have to pump green a bit more. And so there's been a wave of green, and I think that's going to continue here, at least by what I'm seeing on the cards. And then red, I think, will be either next or second most powerful. And then I also like black along that, but I think all those three colors are much better than blue and white. It's hard to tell. This is, the first spoiler season. I haven't even judged all the cards yet, but that's my initial take. Curious, Matt, what you're thinking about color rankings on the way too early rankings grading.
Right. Yeah. No, obviously we don't have a full set yet. We're just going off of the initial spoilers. And I think we're going through from spoilers through Monday, July 15th. Right. So depending on when this goes up, the full set may already be out, but just to be clear on kind of where we put our cutoff for this video, I think that's what we're looking at. So there may be some things out, and hopefully people don't come to us and be like, well, why didn't you talk about this card? This is the best card in the set. And maybe it wasn't spoiled by the time we reviewed it. So tough. We'll cover it in the next video. My overall idea on power rankings, I think it's a little different. I think red is the most powerful color, just kind of based on what I've seen. I think it kind of goes into this idea that we were talking about with aggro. I think it's going to be certainly very powerful early, but I think it's going to stay powerful throughout the, several months of draft as the metagame evolves a little bit here and there. I will say that the way I think about the ratings is slightly different from how I graded them, because I'm also kind of thinking about combos and color archetypes a little bit with that. I'll go into how I graded them in a minute, but in terms of how I rank them, I have red first, and then I kind of have white, blue, and green kind of equal, just because I think there's a fair amount in all of them, and then I have all of
white,
that.
Black and green.
White, black, and green, kind of equal, and because I think there's a fair amount in each of them, and all of those, high, like a tier higher than blue, right? If you look at how I graded, like when I went through and graded all the spoilers, I kind of have red equaling green, and then all of those like a couple of tiers higher, basically, than blue, black, and white, which are all about equal.
I think it's interesting the set as well to go over some of the things to look for as people are grading the cards themselves or judging the individual cards. One thing, I guess the three major points to take aside is that Wizards did quite a bit of switching up the power of their template. So I think everyone who's been drafting regularly have recognized, and Wizards has even come out a few months ago saying they do this. They have a template for, you have to fit this type of card in the set. You have to fit this type of card, this. And they have this template that they fill in, but then they have flexibility to change up the remainder of that template to either make the card a little better or a little worse. And I think they really screwed around with people's perceptions of the cards this round. They took cards that were typically viewed as not that great and made them much better. And they even took cards that typically you view as like, this one's a really good one of the template, and it made it a bit lower. Maybe to give an example of this, we have Reptilian Recruiter. For 3 red, you get a 4/2 Lizard Warrior creature with trample. When Reptilian Recruiter enters, choose target creature. If that creature's power is 2 or less, or if you control another lizard, gain control of that creature until end of turn, untap it, and it gains haste until end of turn. This type of steal a creature and use it as your own typically costs 4 itself. That's not usually a great card, especially without sacrifice. But tacking that on to a 4/2 for 1 more mana makes it quite more powerful.
Yep, 4/2 trample too, which is not insignificant. Like that adds a lot to its value, to me at least, to get in that like final 1 or 2 damage that you might need to kill somebody.
Especially for the red aggro decks, right? It's
right.
exactly what the red aggro wants to do.
Right. Yeah, and especially if you're playing other lizards, like this is a great turn 5 play. You play this turn 5, you steal their big creature. Next turn, you attack all out. You attack them with their big creature on this turn, and then the following turn you attack all out with your stuff. Hopefully they have to block their own creature and kill it, or at the very least take some damage from it, or chump or whatever. But I think this is like a great finisher card for a red aggro deck.
Yeah, I had this as a B+. You have it as a B. I will say I kind of like your grade better in that I would give it maybe a synergy B+ in Lizard specifically. I like this like a lot. But
I played this outside of Lizard.
You could still play it like as a good card. It's like a B in that case, I would say.
Maybe B-. I mean, it definitely pulls me into red though. Like if I see this in an opening pack, this might be a pack 1, pick 1, depending on what else there is in the pack, just because I could see it and it may not pay off later, but like this is a kind of card that can potentially win you a game if you draw it.
Another type of card is the cards where you have a monocolored card, but it's really secretly a typal card, so a specific color pair. An example of this is Harnesser of Storms. For 2 and a red, you get a 1/4 Otter Wizard creature. Whenever you cast a non-creature Otter spell, you may exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. This ability triggers only once each turn. This is only in blue-red Otters. I would not play it anywhere else, even though it's a red card.
Right, yeah. And I mean, it tells you it in the creature type, right? It's an Otter Wizard. So you just by knowing that, okay, wizards, blue, red. Right. So even if you don't read the text of the card, like you just know it off the top of your head. Yeah, I agree. I think this is largely a synergy card. I think I rated it a little higher than yours. I rated this as like a synergy B+, synergy B-. I think it's a really good card for the Otter synergy. The blue red spells matter, because just the fact that it's not quite draw a card, obviously, because you don't get to keep the card if you don't spend it. But just the ability to maybe get that and get lands out of the way, like I think it's a really good ability. While I don't really love a 1/4 creature, it's a decent blocker. It's going to be a little bit hard to get rid of with targeted removal. So I don't know. It's a synergy no matter what. I just think it's a slightly higher synergy, I think, than you rated it. But
yeah, I have a synergy C. You had a synergy B-. Yeah, I just don't love the 1/4 aspect on a 3-mana card that still requires triggers on top of that. But in the deck, I could see this coming up in Otters a little bit more than my synergy C. Another type of card to look out for are hybrid cards that you only want to put in a particular deck. I think my example we might have a little bit of a disagreement on.
Yeah,
but,
we do have a little disagreement on
it. But I'll read the card and then I'll explain why I think this is only for bats. Moonrise Cleric, 1 hybrid white-black, white and hybrid white-black. For a 2/3 bat cleric creature with flying, whenever Moonrise Cleric attacks, you gain a life. The hybrid cards often can be put in multiple decks, right? Just any black deck or any white deck in this case, but they're best in their particular archetype.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
This one I do feel I would only really want in bats, and why? It's not that much better than Windrake, the typical 2/2 blue flyer for 3 mana. It is better, clearly. It has 3 toughness and it gains life when you attack. My problem with it is if you're playing it in a black deck without white, you have to get 1 black out. And then if you're playing in a white deck without black, you have to get 1 white out before you could play it. And that type of cost for something that's not that much more than a Windrake is a lot to me. Now, the real thing I think you get is the flexibility to play 1 white-black in black-white and that gain life trigger that you're going to depend on for bats. That's why I think it's a bats-only card. But what's your take on that, Matt?
Yeah, so I probably rated this a little high when I rated it. I think you rated it as Synergy C+. I rated it as C+. I think I would probably come down to a C, maybe a C- on it overall. But I do disagree a little bit that it's only good in bats. You started with the Windrake argument, and then you're like, but it's better. And I'm like, okay, yeah, it is better. And I could see it being a pretty good 3-drop slot. I like that it gains life when it attacks, right? Gaining a little bit of extra life can sometimes mean the difference between winning and losing a game. But what I really like about it as a pick in draft, and potentially an earlier pick in draft, is that it keeps you open. Like you may go white black with this card, but you could also, if you're like, well, I took it, I'm getting a good amount of white, but I'm not seeing any black, you can just go white green or whatever, and still this is still a playable. Like, this can make your deck. It's not a bad card. It's not like, it may not make the deck if you find a bunch of other better stuff, but like overall, I look at it and I'm like, you know what, this isn't terrible. And so that's really why I'm somewhat bullish on it, is that I think it has the potential to be something you can play in a different archetype if you want a playable. And I think it's probably it doesn't feel like you're settling to me. It doesn't feel like you're putting it in it so much as filler, as much as it is as a decent play.
I definitely think that there will be times that you pick this card, you can't get into white black, and you end up playing it anyway. And so there is some value to the card on leaving you open for sure. We will see other cards like that in this, where it comes up as well, where we disagree on cards. And I think I take the opposite side. I take your side of, I like the fact that it can keep you open. So we definitely both agree that that's a big benefit to these hybrid cards. It's just, I see it as kind of a loss a little bit if I really don't want to be playing this unless I do hit bats. Let's put it that way, compared to some of the other cards out there. And I also might be a little lower on Windrake than you are as well.
Sure, that's fine. And I'm not super high on Windrake, but but it's a fine card, right? It's not. Then this is better. So that's why I look at it. But yeah, I think we can maybe move into some of the ones that we did agree on and we both thought were pretty excellent. So first up here we have Pond Prophet. And it's a split green-blue and a split green-blue. It is a 1/1 creature, Frog Advisor, and when it enters, draw a card. So, I mean, this is just a really great card overall. You're getting a body on the battlefield. It's small, sure, but it only costs 2, and it's giving you card advantage, which it's replacing itself. It's giving you the ability to move your deck along. It's amazing in its own archetype, right? Because if you'll remember, the Frog's archetype relies on bounce or flicker. And now if you can flicker this, holy crap, you're going to just continue getting cards. If you can bounce this and then play it again, you're going to keep getting cards. Later on, when you have some spare mana, just being able to bounce this, maybe every turn or whatever, and play it again. Like, you don't need to attack with it. It's just great for getting you cards. So I think if I rated this as a C+, I looked at it, I was like, I don't think it quite draws me into those two colors, but it's good, and I would probably pick it pretty high, but I'm not sure it draws me into the archetype. But I think you might have had it a little bit higher. What do you think, Jim?
I had it as a B-, but I'm right on that edge, right? Like to C+. I think C+ might be more appropriate. If I were to give it a synergy grade, is what really would bump me into that B- for sure.
Yeah, if you're playing Frogs, you want this card. It's great.
Yeah.
Play it.
My concerns that draw me back to the C+ are, I was tempted to put this into the, you really want to be playing Frogs if you're going to do this and no other deck, but this one I'm more willing to put in just a green deck or just a blue deck, because it has enough good things going for it. Getting a 1/1 and a draw card for 2 mana, even if it's later in the game, is quite a bit of value.
Yeah.
But it does suffer a bit from, if you aren't green-blue, it's harder to play on turn 2. So that's what would pull me to the C+ side of things. Up next, we have Longstalk Brawl. For a green, you get a sorcery. It has Gift a Tapped Fish. So I don't know. I don't think we talked about Gift yet, but
no, we have not talked about the Gift mechanic.
Yeah, it's where you promise something to your opponent. So a fish is a 1/1 blue fish creature token, and it'll come to your opponent tapped. So you give your opponent that before the rest of the card resolves, and you choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. Put a +1/+1 counter on the creature you control if the gift was promised.
Yep.
Then those creatures fight each other. So it's a 1-mana fight spell that can give a +1/+1 counter on your creature and potentially even win the battle with that if you gift the tap fish. But I think we both just like how efficient this is of a fight spell, and it's got options to go for a little bit more reach if you need it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's an incredibly efficient fight spell for 1 mana. I honestly don't think I would really want to use the gift, like unless I absolutely have to. If there's something unless it's something like I absolutely have to get it off the board, and it's otherwise I'm going to die, right? Like, because I don't like the idea of giving my opponent a 1/1, even if it's tapped, and even if it's only a 1/1. But it may be necessary depending on what you get, right? So, but yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly efficient spell. I think I rated this a B-, and you rated it a C+, so we're right around that. Does it draw you into the color or not? I think I'd probably come down to a C+ on it, but it's still pretty good. It's good removal.
Yep.
So next up, we have a card that I think we're both pretty high on for, and that's Take Out the Trash. And I love the art on this because it obviously involves a raccoon and raccoon trash panda, right? So anyways, but so for 1 colorless and 1 red, you get an instant. Take Out the Trash deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If you control a raccoon, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. This is obviously excellent and designed and geared for green-red, just based on the fact that it references raccoons. Even without that extra, the discard and the draw is a really great ability, and if you're playing with raccoons, you should use it. But even without that, 2 mana to do 3 damage is generally pretty good. I think that the standard, though, is usually we get two mana to deal 3 at instant speed to any target. But obviously this is limited to creatures and planeswalkers. But I mean, it's a minor drawback I see in this card. So I think we both rated this just a straight B. It's good.
Yeah, it's this kind of card is always good in limited, and it's usually around the B or so range, sometimes B-. But if you are in raccoons, I attempt to call it a synergy B+ in those cases. Like you get to do your whole rummage thing on top of doing the 3 damage, all for 2 mana. Really great then. But yeah, you're not waiting around to getting raccoons before you get this. You'll play this regardless in red.
Yeah.
All right. Up next, we have what is one of the only uncommon A-bombs we've seen, A-range bombs in the last few sets that we've done.
Right.
So Galewind Moose, 4 green for a 6/6 elemental elk creature. It has flash, and it has vigilance, reach, trample. A 6/6 trampler is oftentimes good and limited when you're green to finish off. The fact that this has vigilance and reach on top is great. And I think the biggest bonus is flash.
It's flash. Yeah.
Yeah. Let them attack into you, flashes out. I mean, I assume down the line, players will see this coming, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. When they see you've got 6 mana open and they're attacking into you, they're probably going to be a little bit skeptical. But it's still a very good. It's still an excellent card, right? It's clearly a bomb. You see this, take it unless you're absolutely not in green, right? The vigilance, reach, trample are going to be huge, right? Vigilance and trample as a combo are just excellent, right? It is absolute beatdown, and you get a blocker. And the fact that it's a 6/6 means it's going to be very hard to kill. I don't think, aside from a targeted destroyed, I don't think there's any, at least as far as we've seen in the spoilers as of today, there's anything that deals 6+ damage, right? I don't think there's any like red and X or what is it, the runaway boulder or something that we saw a few sets ago that was like deal 6 damage. It was the artifact from Caverns of Ixalan. So there's nothing like that. So it's basically a, either you kill it with damage or like blocking damage, or you kill it with a destroy target creature spell.
Yeah, I think we both gave this an A-, and
Yep.
Great card. Looking forward to playing it.
Next up, we have Plume Creed Escort. This is a 1 colorless, 1 blue for a 2/1 bird scout. It also has flash, which is great. It has flying, obviously, as a bird. And when Plume Creed Escort enters, target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. So this is just another all-around excellent card, right? A 2/1 flyer for 2 is basically, at par or at cost. You're not going to usually see a 2/2 flyer for 2, so I'd rather see it on the power side than the toughness anyway. And then the fact that basically you can say, no, you're not going to kill my creature, and I get a 2/1 for 2 mana is just excellent, right? It's insanely efficient as a card, and I think you rated this a B, and I gave it a B-. I probably should come up on it because I think it's pretty good.
I think so. Yeah, enough said.
Right.
That covered it. Moving on to Bushy Bodyguard, which may be one of my favorite cards of the set here so far. For 1 and a green, you get a 2/1 Squirrel Warrior creature with Offspring 2, which is you pay 2 and you'll get a creature token copy of that creature as a 1/1 though. When this creature enters, you may forage. If you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So this is it can be a 2 mana 2/2, or 2 mana 2/1.
Yep.
It can be a 2 mana 4/3 if you do a forage. And it can also bring in for 4 mana, it can be a 4 mana 4/3 + 3/3. You do need enough resources to do the foraging.
Twice.
Twice, yes. But it's a flexible card, and honestly, I can't remember the last time we had a card where it was 4 mana, you got 13 worth of stats and power and toughness for that.
Well, I mean, it's 4 mana and then sacrificing 2 foods, or exiling
cards out of your graveyard.
6 cards from your graveyard, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's very conditional, right? And I think we had a little bit of a difference in the rating on this, right? You gave it a straight up B+. I gave it a C+ or a Synergy B, because I can, if you're playing with food, I think it's much better. But if you're, it's still a good card, and I would definitely pick this pretty high. I don't know that it pulls me into green or pulls me into that archetype, but if I'm going to play it, right? Like at the bare minimum, right? It's a 2/1 for 2, which is not amazing, but it's not terrible. But the idea that you can also play this turn 4 and get a 2/1 and a 1/1 is not bad, right? Like 4 mana for a 2/1 and a 1/1 is also just not bad. So, I think it's, yeah. Go ahead.
I guess I would say there's a lot of different conditions on this.
Right.
I think one of the most common conditions, I would play this as a 2 mana 4/3.
Right. Yes.
Now you do need the setup, for that, but I don't mind waiting till later in the game when I have 3 cards in my graveyard to get a 2 mana 4/3.
Right. Yeah. And that's going to happen pretty easily, right? Like, 3 cards in graveyard by turn 5 is not uncommon, right? Depending on what's going on the board. But
so that's why I didn't want to give it a synergy grade. I would say my B+ is probably more, if you're in squirrels, it's a synergy B+, right? Right. I didn't want to call it synergy because a lot of times that's implying it's only for that deck, and I don't think it's only for squirrels.
So next up, we have Consumed by Greed. So for 1 colorless and 2 black, you get an instant with the option to gift a card. Now, in this case, the opponent will draw a card before the spell resolves. As it resolves, but before the effect on the card takes place. Target opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. If the gift was promised, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. This is just great anyways, right? This is basically 3 mana, instant speed, kill your opponent's largest creature. Which is amazing. It's basically murder in that sense. But obviously, if they have tied creatures for their greatest power, they can choose. But I mean, I think the instances in which you're going to want to use this are when they have like a 6/6 out on the board and, you just want to get rid of it. the gift idea is interesting, right? It's nice that it's optional because you may not have something that you want to target, but if you have something in your graveyard that you really want to bring back, giving your opponent a card is not necessarily a bad thing because you know what you're getting. They might get a land, and so I think it's just an all-around excellent card, and I think I gave it a B+.
Yeah, I gave it a B, and I agree with everything that you said. I couldn't quite go up to the. I really do like to have my removal be able to target exactly what I want, and
Right.
that's all that's keeping me from the B+ there. But it's a great card.
Yeah, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to know. I mean, you're going to know what you're going to get unless they have something tied, and even then, you'll probably know what your opponent's going to pick. So as you play it, you're basically knowing what's getting killed.
So last amongst our like most powerful cards we want to bring up, and before we get into cards we rated differently and want to discuss, this one we both thought this one's powerful. So Quake Tusk Boar for 3 red, you get a 5/5 elemental boar creature with reach, trample, and haste. Just like Vigilance and Trample is a good combination, Haste and Trample is also a very good combination, and perhaps even better in red. Yeah, so I gave this one a B. I think you gave this one a B+. This does
Right.
everything you want to quickly bore down on your opponent, pun intended.
Right. Yeah. So this is almost as good as Galewind Moose in my mind. One thing I will point out, and I think I'll talk about it a little bit more later on some of these cards we disagreed on, is the idea of reach. I think is actually kind of important in this set. There are a lot with the birds archetype and the bats archetype. There are a lot of flyers, and there are a lot of cheap flyers. And so, if you're in a situation where you can't necessarily like bring this guy out and finish the game, he's a really good 5/5 reach blocker that can stop basically anything in the air. That's what I'll add with this guy because I think he does add that little bit of extra value from the reach.
For sure.
So getting into some of the cards that we rated a little bit differently. First up, we have Cindering Cutthroat. And we actually rated this card fairly similar, but I want to talk about the card. I want to talk about both it and the card that we rated very differently. That's somewhat similar. So we'll do both of these. So first up, we have Cindering Cutthroat. It is 2 colorless and then a split either black or red. It is a Lizard Assassin, 3/2, and it enters with a +1/+1 counter on it if an opponent lost life this turn. And then for 1 colorless and either a black or a red, you can pay to give it menace until end of turn. This card, we both put this right around the C+, B- range. I think I gave it a B- and you gave it a C+. The other card is Frilled Spark Shooter. So this is 3 colorless and 1 red for a Lizard Archer 3/3. It has menace and reach. And then Frilled Spark Shooter enters with a +1/+1 counter on it if an opponent lost life this turn. So there are a lot of similarities with these, right? They both have the enters with a +1/+1 counter if an opponent lost life this turn. They both either have or can get menace. The primary differences, right, are the Cindering Cutthroat costs 3 converted mana cost, and the Frilled Spark Shooter cost 4 converted mana cost. And then the power and toughness difference between them. And then obviously the Frilled Spark Shooter has the reach added to it. For me, I really like Frilled Spark Shooter for that reach. And as I just kind of talked about, there's a lot of flyers in this set. And I think that this helps to fill a gap and block some of those flyers, like the 1/2s, the 2/1s, the 2/2s, and even the 3/3s if you get that +1/+1 counter on it. And so I really like that as this. I like that it has the menace built in, that I don't have to pay 2 extra mana for the menace just to be able to attack with it and potentially have it go unblocked or make it much harder to block at the very least. I'll let you kind of talk about why you don't like it as much, but I think I understand your concerns with it, and I think they make sense. So
yeah, and I agree with everything that you said about the card. I just have this huge gap between what I'm willing to give a grade for a card 3 mana cost or lower versus 4 converted mana cost and up. That's for a few reasons. For 4 converted mana cost and up, I could also just play 2 2 mana creatures or 2 mana spells on that
Right.
turn and
2
double
cheaper
spell
spells.
and keep my curve low and all that. So it's costing me something in my curve to add a 4 converted mana cost card. You know, there's a lot of good 4 mana converted mana cost spells that you are really key to finishing out, rounding out your deck sort of a thing.
Right.
And I reserve those spots for those. So basically that's the difference here, is one's at 3, one's at 4. Now my difference is so big that I gave Frilled Sparkshooter a D+ and Cindering Cutthroat a C+. Part of that difference is too the ability for the card to be above rate versus not on base power and toughness. So if you do the thing on Cindering Cutthroat, you get a 3 mana 4/3. That's already above rate. You have to do the thing on Frilled Sparkshooter to make it a 4 mana 4/4. So in the cases that you can't, you're getting kind of below rate. Whereas if you can't for Cindering, you still at least get 3 power at the end of the day. You do have to pay for its menace, and you don't get the reach, are all things considered. But I think that base power toughness and the 4 mana cost gap to 3 is what gives me a full letter grade, if not somewhere near that.
So, so the only other thing I want to expand on is like the idea of the flyers, real quick, right? So I just did a quick data analysis. Now, obviously, we don't have the full set yet, so I don't know what the total will be. But I did a quick look at the total number of flyers at common and uncommon in the set, and there's currently, as of July 15th, well, we're shooting this on the 17th, so as of July 17th, because I just looked at this today, there are a total of 16 common or uncommon flyers in the set. So Outlaws of Thunder Junction and Lost Caverns of Ixalan had 14, so they were a little bit lower. Not since Wilds of Eldraine have we seen this many, and Wilds of Eldraine had 20. And I definitely remember in Wilds of Eldraine losing a number of games just to small flyers. So that may also have a little bit of an impact on my grade here. But I like the idea of being able to stop those pesky 1/2, 2/1 flyers from pinging me, especially because a lot of them have good abilities tacked on, or decent abilities tacked on that could help swing the game as they go, like the one we talked about that gains you a life every time it attacks, right? That kind of thing. This stops that. So yeah, I mean, I think we'll see how the meta evolves, and kind of see where it goes. But I don't think either one's a bad card.
I did forget to mention too the ability to stay open with Cindering Cutthroat on the black or the red. That also adds the difference. Yes. But
we can play it in a black only deck. Yeah.
Up next, we have Life Creed Duo. For 1 and a white, you get a 1/2 bat bird creature with flying. Whenever another creature you control enters, you gain a life. I gave this a D, Matt gave this a C+, and I think that's because of his trauma from getting killed by all the flyers. But now you're seeing all these reach creatures that can protect you. So does that bring you down at all?
No, I like this card. I think it's not a bad 2-drop in my mind, right? It obviously is meant for the archetype that it's meant for is green-white, right? But I would not be mad playing this in red-white, right? I think this could go really good because you're still playing a lot of creatures. And
that white-black. I think you said earlier green-white, but
green-white is tokens, right? So green-white is go wide tokens. So this could be really good in green-white tokens.
So I didn't think about that. That's a good point.
It is a bat, yes, but I think that honestly this shines most in green-white tokens.
Yeah.
But you can certainly play it in other archetypes as well. I just generally like this in the 2-drop slot. I mean, I wouldn't. It's funny. It also has a bird. I actually probably would not play this in blue-white, but I would play it in the other 3 archetypes with white. And so I think it goes really well with a number of different white archetypes. And just in general, and anything where you have a lot of creatures, you're going to maybe be able to gain 3, 4, 5 life with this. It's not going to be a high priority target for your opponent because it's just a 1/2, but it can potentially help you later on. So I think it, I'm somewhat bullish on it. Is it the best 2-drop? No, but is it a decent 2-drop? Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking me up on it. So I was at a D. I'm somewhere now to like C minus, D plus, somewhere in there. I can see. I'm going to start at a D plus, but I can see where there can be value here in multiple decks. I did not see the green before, and that is bringing me up a bit. Combined with if we start seeing a few more of the life gain triggers, I haven't seen that many impressive ones yet in black and white, but that could just be early spoilers as well.
Right.
And if we start seeing that, I'll come up as well. So yeah,
Right.
I can see myself coming up on it.
And so the other one we had it's another one of these duo cards that we had a little bit of a difference of opinion on is Kindle Spark Duo. And so for 2 colorless and 1 red, you get a 1/3 Lizard Otter. It has the ability to tap it. It deals 1 damage to target opponent. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, untap Kindle Spark Duo. I like this card a lot. I'm generally a fan of low power, high toughness cards that can ping your opponent for 1. The fact that this has the ability to untap whenever you cast a non-creature spell, I think brings it up a little bit. I don't love that it costs 3, but I think it works really well in the blue-red archetype because you're going to have a lot of spells, that non-creature spells that will help sort of untap it and deal additional. I think, at worst, this is a guaranteed 1 damage per turn to your opponent, whether you attack with it or you use it to just deal the 1 damage. I would probably never attack with this, but I could see a certain there's probably a situation where that's relevant, but usually I would just save it as a blocker, block something small, and then deal a damage. It is a little pricey. It's obviously understated, but I think the ability to deal consistent damage to your opponent, particularly if you're playing with other instants and sorceries, is pretty good. So what I think I gave this.
How good do you think it is? Yeah, grade will kind of, I think, indicate.
Yeah, I gave it a C, right, which is, I think pretty average. I might come down to a C minus on it, but I do think it's generally better than trash or generally better than like filler. But yeah, I'll let you talk about your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I have Synergy C minus, and I'm not coming up from there. I might even go down to Synergy D plus, and here's why. This card, we've seen this card before. It typically costs 2. I just think costing 50% more on top of that is too much. Like usually you want to get a couple of these type of things down. That's much harder to do at the 3 converted mana cost price. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm going to get killed by this at some point, so I'm going to buy that for sure. But I just, yeah, I'm not. I think it's a little too expensive. That's all it is.
Right.
But not unplayable. Like in the blue red deck, you'll play this as maybe like a 23rd card kind of thing in my mind. That's kind of where I see this. Up next, we have Parting Guest. For white, you get an instant where you can gift a tapped fish, and then exile target non-token creature. If the gift wasn't promised, return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. I think this is the card we have the most difference on. I gave it a D plus. I'll start with why I have a D plus, and then you have this as a B minus. You can talk about that, which I didn't see right away. But I'm still not convinced I'm going to come up much. But the reason I gave this a D plus is it reminds me of Bovine Intervention. So that's the 1 and a white instant that was in Outlaws of the Thunder Junction. A lot of people like the look of this card. You can destroy target artifact or creature for 2 mana. That sounds great. It's just the downside of ever giving your opponent something like a 2/2 Ox creature token is a lot. That made this card as bad as a D minus in the rankings and win rate. That's how bad it was. Now, clearly, this is not as bad as Bovine Intervention, right? You're gifting them a 1/1, which is a big difference from a 2/2, and it's tapped. But there is some upside to it as well. And do you want to go into that?
Yeah. So, I take your points on this. I like the flexibility of being able to spend 2 mana and kill whatever I want. Right. It's hard to find. You only see it, somewhat rarely. Get Lost is a good example of this. Get Lost is obviously, a superior card in terms of what it can target because it can also target artifacts, enchantments. but that gives the controller 2 map tokens, right? So it's similar in that sense. Get Lost, like I said, is obviously better, but I like the idea of just basically being able to blow up a creature for 2 mana at instant speed. I usually see it as like this is what I'm going to use to help me finish the game, at which point I don't really care that they get a tapped 1/1 fish. The thing that I really like about this card is its dual purpose. And that's the fact that if you don't give the gift, you can use this to flicker one of your own creatures, and it comes back with a +1/+1 counter. And so, given the ETB effects that we see in like some of the green and blue and white even cards, and then the idea that you can protect a creature from being destroyed or targeted in some way by flickering it in response, makes this a really good dual purpose card. And it's a nice utility card to have in hand. And so I would probably I think I'm going to stick by my B- rating in that I really like this, and I would prioritize it simply because I can either use it defensively or offensively and get something out of it for pretty cheap.
Yeah, you've definitely talked me up on it. Not by much, right? This is a C range card in my opinion, so I'm gonna go C- as my grade. But yeah, it's an interesting one. It's definitely one that I want to keep an eye on as the format evolves.
Next up, we have Sunshower Druid. So this card, for 1 green, you get a 0/2 Frog Druid. But when Sunshower Druid enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and you gain 1 life. And so this is, a turn 1/1/3 for 1 mana, which is not bad in my mind, because it's going to serve as a decent blocker even into the mid game. It's going to be able to maybe ping your opponent on turn 2 if they don't have a 1-drop and you went first, or they don't have a 2-drop. I know 1-drops aren't sort of super important, but I do like this as a 1-drop, and then I like it later in the game to potentially pump something bigger. Obviously, we just talked about Parting Gust, right? This is a great example of something that you could Parting Gust yourself, right? So you can remove this and bring it back. It'll have a +1/+1 counter, and then it'll add another +1/+1 counter to something else. I see it has some good synergies, and I think I graded this a C+.
Yeah, I have it a C- in that it's a good statted 1-drop as a 1/3 for 1. I don't typically like, you already made the point, but to spend 1 mana cards, I'm not a huge fan of. I am when they are fueling an engine of some sort.
Right.
But usually they aren't worth spending a whole card on. And that's kind of my gripe on this. Now, this is a good way to have a 1 mana creature. And, there is like the green-white go wide where you do want cards, yes, that can create multiple creatures on their high end, but on the low end, you're hopefully still also playing creatures as well, to get them all out there. So I can see cases with that. The frog synergies and the green-blue side, that's something as well. So yeah, I have it as playable. I just not quite your average playable, so I have it as a C-.
Right. That's fair. I think this will play really well in frogs, like you said. I think it will play really well in I think it's rabbits, green white. But I also think this may play well in raccoons, green red, because I think that the ability to give something that might have trample an additional +1/+1 or something like that will be a good later game card. I don't think it necessarily plays as well in squirrels, but I guess which is green black, but I guess I could be wrong. So that overall, I think it plays in 3 of the 4 archetypes for green.
I see it as 2 of the 4. I don't see it in raccoons, but who knows? We can
right. Yeah, I think it's less. I think it no matter what. I agree with you. It's less good in raccoons, but I do like the idea, given the amount of trample that both red and green have, that it can make something with trample just a little bit bigger.
And then last up on the disagreements, we have Fell, which is a card that most people who are following the spoilers have seen and heard about. And I do think it's causing a decent amount of contention amongst different players. Some people love this card, some people hate this card. And even when you have love and hate, a lot of times the grades still come out the same or so. So it's just people's opinions of removal. So it's pretty simple. 1 black, destroy target creature as a sorcery speed. And I think a lot of that is, 1 black for destroy target creature is, definitely good. It's just we're used to seeing a lot of these destroys on instants, and that does make a big difference. So yeah, how do you feel about this at sorcery speed?
Yeah, I don't love that it's at sorcery speed. I gave it a C plus. I mean, it's clearly a good card. It's a good card. It will get played quite a bit. I will hate it getting played against me, even when my opponent plays it on their turn as opposed to mine. But I want to contrast it with Parting Gust, right? Like I look at the difference between Parting Gust and this, and I'm like, I like Parting Gust more. I gave Parting Gust a B minus because I think I just like it just a little bit more for the fact that it's instant speed, even though. And this I don't think is super relevant in the set, but the exile versus destroy, right? Like you can exile an indestructible, you can't do that with you can't destroy an indestructible, right? So, but I think it's a great card. I just like I said, I'm comparing it with like Parting Gust, and I'm like I like Parting Gust just a little bit more.
Well, so I do like the mana efficiency, so that's just speaking to Fel. Like I love when things cost low, so yeah. I love this card enough to be a B plus in my mind. But we do have a bet to place at some point in this. Do you want to take Parting Gust versus Fel? Whichever card is the higher win rate after 2 weeks of play, winner takes.
Here's the thing: I don't think I'll ever take a white card and bet on win rate. Like I don't think that's not a smart bet.
Right.
I might bet that it's like one of the higher win rate white cards, but I don't think that I would bet that it's like, gonna have a higher win rate than Fel. Black is always gonna have a higher win rate overall than white.
We can normalize for this. We can do the top so sort win rate of uncommons per color, and that I'll take Fel is a higher win rate by ranking of uncommons in black than Parting Gust is on uncommons in white.
I'll have to think about that. I'm still not sure that I would take that bet. But
all right. We have a whole other week before the set even.
I want to see what other cards come out too, because we don't have the full set. So I want to see if there's something else that comes out where I'm like, no, this is going to be the card. This is going to be the card that will have the best win rate. So let's think about it. But I might take that one because I just think the utility of Parting Gust is going to be so good. But I'm not sure. The thing that holds me back is even if we normalize it, I think white's just not going to be played anywhere near as much as black, and I think therefore this card's like Parting Gust is just not going to get used a lot because white's not going to get played anywhere near as much. So I think you're just going to have a smaller N, which is going to tend to make things fluctuate more, right? Versus like Fel, everybody's going to be like, yes, I want that destroy target creature, and I'm playing black anyway. So I don't know.
Right,
Let me think about it.
On that, and in the meantime, let's poll the audience to help out with this. I want to hear in the comments below what you think is going to be better and why. What's your take on Fel? What's your take on Parting Gust? Are you Team Jeremy or are you Team Matt? And what do you think about that being the bet? Team Jeremy, let's pressure Matt into this one and have the audience say he has to move forward with it. Just kidding. But I do want to hear your comments down below on how you think Fel is versus Parting Gust. And with that, I think we'll leave the cliffhanger on what the bet's going to be till next week.
Yep. And next week we'll have the full set, and we'll be able to maybe give some more initial impressions, maybe go over a few more cards, talk about some draft strategies based on what we've seen in the full set, where we think the highest, likelihood are going to be, like what's going to be the most drafted colors, things like that. So, but yeah, we look forward to talking more about it.
I especially would want to go over, I think, the archetypes and cards that fit well into them. Maybe we can kind of group into it, what to look for.
Your signposts.
Nice. Yeah.
Signposts. Yep.
All right. Well, then stay tuned to next time to see that. And thanks everybody, and see you next week.
Yep. See you in the next one.